What's growing on, gardeners? It's Monday, June 26th, and the heat and humidity is here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. And when the heat and humidity arrives, it can be very challenging to keep our tomato plants healthy. So on today's video, I'm going to share with you 4 things that you need to do now to keep your tomato plants as healthy and productive as possible. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. The first thing we need to do is we need to remove the lowest leaves on the plants that are below the first flower cluster. That's because the lowest leaves on tomato plants are magnets for disease. The way most tomato plants get disease is from splashing of rain or irrigation water that hits the soil, and then pathogens inside the soil splash on the undersides of the leaves, and then they colonize the leaves of the tomato plants. That's why, generally speaking, when you see disease appear on a tomato plant, it works its way up from the bottom and slowly crawls its way up to the top. So it's very important that on our tomato plants, before they come down with bad disease, we remove these lowest leaves, especially if they drag on the ground, because leaves that are lying on the ground are the biggest magnets of disease of all. Here you can see some of the tomato leaves that I just removed, and these leaves are showing early signs of leaf spot, so that's why we had to get them off the plant as soon as possible. However, you'll also notice that I didn't remove every single little bit of leaves around the fruits, because we don't want to leave the fruits susceptible to sun scald. And if we simply remove all of the leaves that protects the fruits from the sun, you could actually have the fruits get damaged. So sometimes when it comes to pruning, less is more. Get that airflow up there, get those leaves off the ground, get them out of the immediate splash zone, but don't remove more than you have to, because it can leave your fruits open to damage. Now, regardless if you're growing indeterminate, determinate, semi-determinate, or dwarf tomatoes, it is safe to remove the foliage on the lower portion of the plant up to the first flower cluster. It will not harm the plants at all. However, what you do in terms of pruning after that will depend on the type of tomato that you're growing. For example, indeterminate tomatoes, like the tomatoes that you see right here, grow as a vine, and these vines contain suckers that come off of the main stem. So this is your main stem, this is the sucker that comes off at a 45-degree angle. It is generally acceptable to remove suckers as necessary to control the growth of the tomato vines when you're growing an indeterminate tomato at the expense of the fruit, because remember, the fruit production is actually coming off of the flowers that form off the suckers. So when you remove suckers on an indeterminate tomato, you will remove some of the fruiting flowers. However, because they grow indefinitely, you can usually make up the amount of fruit loss by allowing the main stem of the tomatoes to grow larger. With determinate and dwarf tomatoes, this is not the case. So it is very important that if you're growing determinate or dwarf tomatoes, you never remove any of the suckers, because if you do, you will not get flowers on your plants and they will not produce fruit for you. So keep that in mind. Pruning above that first flower cluster is relative to the type of tomato that you're growing. The second thing you need to do right now is to vibrate all of your tomato flowers with an electric toothbrush. Now, earlier in the season, I made an in-depth tutorial as to why this is the best way to hand pollinate your tomatoes. Far superior than simply shaking the plants or flicking the flowers. This is the way to go if you want to get as close to 100% pollination as possible. Now, I will link to that video above and down in the video description if you want to see the full tutorial why this is so important to do. But if you're not willing to do that, or you just don't have the time, here is the quick summary. Tomato flowers have the male and female parts enclosed in the same flower. So the way the tomatoes are traditionally pollinated is the wind comes along, it rattles the tomato flowers, and all of the male pollen gets all over the female parts enclosed in that same flower, and then if they're pollinated properly, that will set fruit. However, there is a problem with the simply natural method. Wind is erratic and unstable. Tomato flowers are only viable for pollination for a couple of days before they will shrivel up and fall off if they're not pollinated. So if you ever have your tomato flowers shrivel up and fall off on you, it's due to lack of pollination. So if you get stuck in a calm spell of days, the tomatoes will not pollinate. And also, if the wind is too violent, the tomatoes may not pollinate properly either. And the buzzing of an electric toothbrush is just the perfect RPM to jostle and vibrate a flower, and it results in near 100% pollination every single time. And I'll quickly show you how to do this. But first, this is why you must do this now. Tomato flowers are only fertile in ideal conditions. In order for the tomato pollen to be viable, it must be dry and powdery. So when days get above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, nights get above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and dew points get high, the tomato flower pollen gets clumpy and moist, and it will not pollinate the female parts of the flower. So it doesn't matter how much you shake the flowers, how windy it is, even if you vibrate it with an electric toothbrush, it will not pollinate once the tomato pollen becomes gloopy and clumpy. So the reason why we need to do this now is the heat and humidity is just starting to set in. So if we want to set as many tomatoes as possible, we need to do it before it gets insanely hot in July and August. All you need to do to pollinate the tomatoes is turn on your electric toothbrush and then touch the backs of the toothbrush to the flowers, and then you'll see often a little burst of pollen. And then once you see that little burst of pollen, or many times even if you don't, the tomatoes will be pollinated, and that is the best way to hand pollinate your tomatoes. Hand pollinating your tomato flowers like that is how you get enormous full clusters of beefsteak tomatoes like this. Look at the crazy pollination you will get. All of these tomato flowers set for me because I used this very easy method. Any electric toothbrush will do for this technique. You don't need anything fancy. This is the very electric toothbrush that I use every morning and every night for my own teeth. I just keep a spare head. If you need an electric toothbrush, I would strongly recommend that you get yourself one with a rechargeable battery. Don't get the really cheap ones in the stores because the AA batteries are more expensive than the toothbrush itself. If you need one, I'll link to a really cheap one with a rechargeable battery and many additional heads down in the video description. The third thing you need to do is cover your fruits from insect damage, because unlike us, the insect pests don't take a day off. How many times have you been excited to see a tomato start to turn red in your garden, only to come out the next day and see that it's full of wormholes or sucker holes from stink bugs or leaf-footed bugs or some other pests? Well, the pest populations are exploding this time of year, and believe me when I tell you, they are working overtime 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, stalking your garden. So we need to protect our fruits so they don't take damage, so we get to harvest them, not the pests. The easiest, cheapest, and fastest way to keep insect pests off of your fruits and to protect them is to simply get yourself a large insect net and then throw the insect netting over the plants. By doing like this, you can protect all of your fruits in seconds. It's so easy. However, there is a downside to the insect netting because you can only get them so large. And when you have monster tomato plants like I do at this time of the year, sometimes you can't get the insect netting to cover all of the plants. So when they do get to be about 8 feet tall, you may have to resort to other measures, but don't you worry, I have a simple, easy solution for that as well. If you get to the point that your plants are so large that an insect netting is not enough, you can also cover them with organza bags. If you've ever been to a wedding before, you've probably seen these full of rice, or they have other little party favors in them. They're dirt cheap. You can get hundreds of them for only a few dollars, and they have a drawstring. All you have to do is you take one of these bags and you put it around the fruit, and then you just pull the drawstrings, and that will make it impossible for any kind of bug to get in there. I'll give you a closer look. All you'll do is you'll take the organza bag and you'll gently slip it over the fruit, being careful that you don't dislodge it from the vine. Then once it is over the fruit, you will pull the drawstrings, and that is it. That will protect your fruit from damage. If you're interested in purchasing either the organza bags or the insect netting, I have them all linked in my Amazon storefront down in the video description under the list Insect Barriers and Fruit Protection. They come in all different sizes, all different lengths, and they're all very affordable, and you can use them for many years to come. The fourth thing we're going to do is we are going to give our plants a boost with fertilizer. Now, probably by now you either have tomatoes that are flowering and forming tomatoes, or maybe you even have tomatoes in the ripening process like I do. And if you haven't fertilized your tomatoes since you transplanted them, they are going to be running out of energy and they need food. Now, the way I like to fertilize my tomatoes is I go around to each plant and I give them 1 to 1.5 tablespoons of an organic all-purpose granulated fertilizer, such as the one that I have in my hand right here. Anything around a 555 NPK will do. And then I like to give them half to 1 tablespoon of bone meal as well. And I place both fertilizers in a small ring around the plants, and I take my fingertips and I scratch that into the top inch of the soil. After your granulated organic fertilizers have been worked into the soil, they then have to be wetted down with water in order to assist in the decomposition, because they are not immediately bioavailable by the plants. They have to be broken down first for the nutrients to be activated. In order to kick the plants hard and give them a little bit more food right up front, I actually like to water in the organic fertilizer with a water-soluble fertilizer. And if you don't have to be 100% organic, what I like to do is I like to take a watering can and put in about 2 to 3 tablespoons of something like Alaska fish emulsion, because it is chock full of micronutrients. And then I like to add a 1 tablespoon per gallon concentration of an all-purpose fertilizer like Jack's 20-20-20 or J.R. Peters Professional 20-20-20. Now, if you don't have Jack's or J.R. Peters products, you could also alternatively use something like Miracle Grow Tomato right off the shelf at your local big box store. No, these will not hurt your plants or your soil in any way, shape, or form when you use them in the concentrations and frequencies as recommended by the manufacturer. So I like to do this every 2 weeks or twice a month to all of my tomato plants, and I find that gives them incredible production. And again, to make things simple for you, I'll put product links to everything I featured in this video down in the video description. I hate to sound like I'm pushing products, but I use all of these things in real life for real, and I pay for them all out of my own pocket. I've purchased every single thing with my own money that you see in the shelf here in my shed. So I just want to make things as easy and transparent as possible for you. My only trick is I try to buy as much as I can in the fall when they're on clearance, because a lot of times you can get all these things for half price. And that right there are 4 things that you should do right now to maximize your success growing tomatoes. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I featured in this video or that I use in my garden in general, they are all linked down in my Amazon storefront in the video description, and I place those direct links in there for your convenience as well. And while you're there, check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
Dale, what you got there, buddy? You got yourself a bone? Can I have a bite? Can I have a little bite of the bone? Oh, ho, ho. Now suddenly you want it? Oh, I thought you didn't want it, buddy. You weren't chewing on it. Now that I took it, you suddenly want it? You're such a little boy. You're such a little boy. Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying it, buddy.